Have you ever been using a Unity component and thought, I wish I could add a piece of functionality to that editor? Of course you have. You watch this channel after all, and by now you're probably feeling the itch to hack the editor every way you can. Well, let's scratch that itch, shall we? By hacking that editor to pieces. It's not going to be pretty, and Unity don't want you doing it, but who cares? We're going to do it anyway. Now, I should start with a caveat about how this can break the editor for that component, but I'm not your boss. I'm simply the guy holding the screwdriver pointing at the power outlet. I never forced you to become a human light bulb. So I have picked the simplest example I could think of at the time to show this editor overriding. I'm going to place a trigger in front of this pit in this castle by Nature Manufacture. Entering that trigger will call up this nightmare fuel by Protofactor, which happens to be on early access sale in the store right now. Links in the description. Now, the example itself for this editor overriding will be zeroing out the collider and moving the transform to compensate. And that's all going to be done in one button appended to Unity's collider editor. But it's not about the functionality of the zeroing of the collider. We're concerned with how to override its editor, and in doing so, potentially other editors provided by Unity. So we will create a script called box collider extended editor. And like any other editor, it's going to derive from the editor class. And we'll add the attribute custom editor, and we'll specify it's for the box collider class, Unity's box collider class. Now, we override the onInspector GUI and we'll make our button. We'll add a little label denoting that this is a tools section of the editor, and then create the button. Inside this, we will get the box collider target, we will set our transform to the center, and we'll set our center to the 0. Nice and neat. Now, good developers make things undoable. If you don't, there is a special place in hell for you. Now, we are changing the transform and the box collider, so we will record both objects, and because we are worried about hitting the undo key too often, we will collapse both of these up into a nice little undo group. Perfect. Now, jumping into Unity, let's see that functionality in action. We can recenter the box collider and the transform changes to compensate. Hitting play and spawning into the trigger brings up our new friend from the pit. He wants a hug. Notice anything wrong, apart from the spider being a bit hangry? Well, looking at the inspector and everything is gone. That is because we hijacked the editor and did nothing for the original box collider passenger. Going back to the code, we're going to call the base method for onInspector GUI. And jumping back in Unity, we can now see all the variables, but none of the normal editor layout for the button. And here is the original for comparison. Now, you could recreate that editor functionality yourself, or you could just leave it as is and say, well, I didn't need that edit collider button. And you could also drive the wrong way down a road. They're all bad ideas. So we're going to go back in and we're going to delete that base call, and we're going to do something else instead. We'll create the original editor and we're going to insert it into this editor. If you're thinking, well, that's Inception and the movie was confusing enough, how is this going to work? It's actually a lot easier than you think, and I'm going to show you how. So first, we need to know the type of editor. Not the target, which is box collider, but the editor for the box collider. Well, that's easy, right? We just use the box collider editor, and we're going to build this in the onEnable method, so we only do it once. But oh look, it's one of those helpful red lines that we as coders absolutely love. So let's check the error. Yep, you guessed it, Unity's wonderful protection level has screwed us once again. This class, this editor class, yep, it's internal. Thanks, Unity. Well, thank you, Reflection. We'll get the type by using the type name string, which is not box collider editor, but instead Unity editor.box collider editor. And we'll put in a comma, and then we'll stick in Unity editor again for assembly resolution. Now, we've got the type. We can have some fun with it. What we'll do is we'll call create editor, and we'll pass it the targets from this editor and that editor type we just got. Jumping into our onInspector GUI method, we'll call this editor's onInspector GUI method. There's your inception. Now, there's one caveat to this, outside of the whole reflection and hacking Unity's own editor thing. We need to destroy this new editor, the one we've created. So when we're finished with it, on disable, we'll do just that. So, jumping back into Unity, we can see the full editor, the original editor, and our new button. It's all returned and it's all looking wonderful. Now pressing our recenter button and messing with the box collider recenters it, as we've seen before. That's brilliant. So let's briefly, very briefly, touch on some potential downsides. Unity changes could break this editor in the future. They didn't plan on you hijacking their editors after all. And there is a slight performance overhead. It's very minimal, but you just need to understand that it's there. That being said, if you are adding a side component to perform simple editor functionality to Unity's editors, and yes, I've seen that happen, then you're going down the wrong path, and you should consider an alternative approach like this option, or one of the others that I might explain later on. So, making this video has ticked off my homework task for the week, and your homework, should you choose to accept it, and not laugh at the idea of some random voice on the internet giving you homework, is to let me know in the comments what functionality on what Unity component you're going to add. How are you going to hack the editor? But before you do, I'll give you a brief glimpse at another, just to maybe spur some more imagination for you. When using the timelines and the playable directors, I will sometimes have multiple timelines that I'll switch between. Maybe a train comes in and a train goes out. Maybe one is for a character arriving along, and maybe another is when the train is full of zombies. Who knows why? But anyway, I often find myself needing to switch back and forth between timelines, which means manually switching the playable, which is just nightmare fuel for the tools developers that are looking for absolute performance. Anyway, my little drop-down customization here does the job for me by using the playable director's binding system against itself. So again, let me know in the comments what you will do with this newfound power. Oh, and like and subscribe and wishlist the game and pick up this creature while it's on early access. And for those that stayed, what is becoming a bit of a recurring theme here, let's do a bonus feature. You can override the component editor, but if you're not comfortable with that, you can always add a right-click menu to that component. There's nothing stopping you from doing that, and there's no reflection needed. So let's take our collider. If we extract the functionality of the recenter into a static class, we can add to that class a menu item with a method to call this functionality. Now the path to that right-click menu is context for the context menu, box collider for, well, the box collider, and then whatever name you want to give it, like recenter. And that's it. Now we have a right-click option added to one of Unity's components. And now I'm done.